Running on a treadmill versus running outside. What's easier? What's harder? What are the main differences? What's a better stimulus? Which should you be doing? I'm going to answer all those questions and more on the next episode of, okay, I'm sounding like I'm a TV game show host, but let's break this down. Okay, treadmill versus outdoor running. I've put together a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, as you can see here for this. Yes, I work a 9-to-5 job. I do a lot of corporate America presentation things, so I'm kind of just in that headspace zone, and I figured, I can do this for my YouTube channel if I want to. Like, PowerPoints don't have to just be for work. They can be for fun stuff too. And it's a topic I'm relatively passionate about. It's something that I've been dealing with recently, having to run a lot on the treadmill. So I figured let's do a deep-ish dive into the topic and see what the main differences are between treadmill running and outdoor running, and what's more effective and what you should consider yourself in your running career. So I start this presentation with kind of a pretty blanket statement here, which is running on a treadmill generally requires less physical effort and is a less effective training stimulus for outdoor racing. And that, of course, is versus doing your running outdoors, okay? This is regardless of what running surface you're running on. So whether that's grass, asphalt, concrete, a track, crushed limestone, I don't care. Running on a treadmill is not as good of a stimulus in general, generally speaking, and it's easier to run faster on the treadmill than any of those surfaces I just described. And I'm talking about your standard motorized treadmill belt here, so your Lifetime treadmills at your Planet Fitness and your typical treadmills you see at your gym. I'm not talking about like the self-motored ones where you have to like push off and then you kind of run your own speed. Those are actually harder a lot of times, okay? And I'm also not talking about some maybe newer fangled smart treadmills. I know there's actually some cooler treadmill technology coming out now that is probably more so trying to mimic running outdoors and actually running. So I'm talking about your run-of-the-mill standard treadmill you see at Planet Fitness, at your apartment gym complex, that kind of thing. So the whole idea here, and I get it, it's a very blanket statement up front. You got the same runner, they're running the same pace. It's going to be easier on the treadmill versus outside, and it's also going to be a slightly worse stimulus in general for your muscles and your body when you compare it to preparation for outdoor racing. That's the thesis statement here, okay? There are multiple factors and nuances to this, though. It is not as easy as me just ending the presentation here, although I could. There's a lot we're going to get into. I want to research this more so in the future. I've done quite a bit of research here, but not quite enough. There's a lot on the biomechanical physics end that I'm still a little bit confused about. I'll be upfront and honest on that, but definitely very interesting topic. So let's dive a little bit deeper. I mentioned it's easier on the treadmill versus outside, okay? So the main reason it's easier is for one main reason, right? And that is air resistance, okay? You may have heard this before, but when you are running on the treadmill, there's no air. You're not generating any headwind when you're, running on a treadmill. You're physically still, okay? You're suspended in space. And so when you're running outside, you are generating a headwind. So your body has to overcome the force of the air that you're generating as you run. And so the faster you run, the more this force of drag against you increases. It actually increases in a squared relationship. So if you're just walking outside, you won't feel the effects of the drag all that much. But the more you increase your velocity, this force of drag down here is equals 1/2 the density of air times the coefficient of drag times the area it's affected on times the velocity squared. So, 2 miles an hour versus 8 miles an hour, you're going to go from a factor of 2 to the second, which is 4, to 8 to the second, which is 64. That's a lot. Somebody fact check my calculations there, but I think I'm right. So The force of drag, you have to overcome that. And like I said, on the treadmill, you don't have to overcome that. You're just standing still. You're not standing still, you're moving your legs, but you're not physically moving forward. The air around you is still. So a cool way to think of it is if you're running 8 miles per hour on the treadmill, it's almost like you're outside running with an 8 mile per hour tailwind at your back. Because if you're just outside and there's no headwind or tailwind, you are effectively running into an 8 mile an hour headwind if you're running 8 miles an hour with no wind around you. So imagine you just had an 8 mile an hour tailwind. It would feel really nice outside. So that's what it's like running on the treadmill. And a good point about this is that the wind and the weather, the direction of the wind and all these things, that plays a big role in how this whole air resistance factor can impact your running speed outside. For instance, you could have a 20 mile an hour headwind already without even running, right? It could be a terrible weather day, the direction you're running. There's been years at the Boston Marathon being a point-to-point course where you have a headwind the whole way. And a 10 mile an hour headwind is no joke, guys. That's a good amount of drag that your body's going to have to overcome. And add that to the speed that the force of drag that's adding because of the speed that you're running at, it's even more. So this is the biggest reason why you can run faster on the treadmill versus outside, especially at faster speeds, because there's effectively no drag forces. There's no wind that you're generating around you. You're just still in space. You're a hamster running on a wheel. So to move on with this, how is this easier calculated? It's a pretty complex calculation to transform how the force of drag plays a role on how much easier it is to run, right? Like what effect the force of drag has on your effort level. So they actually did a calculation or ran a study in the late 90s. And a lot of people have heard set the treadmill to 1% incline and this will outdo the effects of not having air resistance on the treadmill. So they found in this study, and I should read this completely. I was only able to get access to the abstract. I had to pay to read the whole thing, but basically the study suggests that running speed has a linear relationship with oxygen consumption. So in a way, based on, you could literally convert based on how much oxygen a runner was intaking through some sort of metabolic device, you could convert that to, okay, it'll go up in a linear fashion with running speed. Okay, so what they did is they analyzed the oxygen consumption for a series of trained runners running flat outside and then running on the treadmill at different grades. So flat on the treadmill and then 1%, 2%, 3% grades on the treadmill. And so from the study, they found that based on the differences in the measured oxygen consumptions, the running outdoors most aligned with the same oxygen consumption as running 1% incline on the treadmill. So the aerobic demands were matched through a 1% treadmill grade versus if you were just running outdoors flat. And again, the main reason there is the wind resistance and the force of drag that your body has to overcome. Okay, so again, it depends a lot on the speed you're running. This says 1% incline, right? Just in general. Well, if you're walking at a 1% incline versus if you're running 12 miles an hour, there's differences there, right? There's different drag forces you'd be generating outdoors versus indoors. So this isn't an all-encompassing 100% accurate rule to just put your treadmill at 1% incline and you'll be fine. It's not to say that, but it is a start, right? They found that, or they suggested that oxygen consumption linearly related to speed, and they found that the consumption levels were similar, thus the speed levels should be similar effort-wise outdoors versus, in general, running 1% incline indoors on the treadmill. So that's one thing, air resistance, probably the biggest thing as far as why it's actually easier. Now, a few more things to get into here, and the rest of these are more so either misconceptions, side comments, and then also going into what the whole stimulus effect and the difference between the surface of running on a treadmill versus maybe running on concrete or asphalt outside. So the moving belt, this is a misconception. A lot of people think that because the treadmill has a moving belt, it reduces the amount of effort you have to put into like the horizontal propulsion that you're pushing off the treadmill with. Like a lot of people think like, oh my gosh, I could technically just hop up and down and like stay on the treadmill, right? Whereas outside, I'm actually having to physically propel myself forward. This is actually a misconception and it's incorrect. The only thing that's changing is the reference point, right? If you had a runner on, say a train is moving. I have this illustration here. This train's moving 10 miles an hour and the runner is running on the train at 10 miles an hour, the opposite direction that the train is moving. And you have an observer here in the corner, and he's just chilling there. It would look to him like the runner's not even moving because the train's moving 10 miles an hour here. He's running at 10 miles an hour. The stationary observer, all he's seeing is a guy standing in place, staying in the same direction, staying in the same location, which is incorrect. The guy is actually moving. So literally all that's changing is the reference point. If like you can think of it another way. If you had a really long treadmill and somebody was just standing, like a really long and wide treadmill, you had a guy just standing on the treadmill, he's moving back as the belt moves this way, but then you have another guy who's actually running to stay in the same physical location with the treadmill. It would be a 10 mile an hour difference or an 8 mile an hour difference, whatever it is. So there's no, I mean, the moving belt analogy is bullshit. It's cap. There's no real differences in the amount that your body has to work to stay on the belt or whatever. Literally all that's changed is the reference point. So that's the misconception there. Now, something that is worth noting though is ground reaction and impact forces. So outside, we commonly run, on surfaces like concrete, asphalt, more rigid surfaces than the treadmill a lot of times. We run on trails and we do run on grass and things like that. But the treadmill has inherently some amount of like mechanical flex and cushion to it. And it absorbs some of the shock from your legs and your joints. And this is a good thing in a lot of ways. Because it can reduce the risk of injury. If you're slamming your legs into the concrete every day, and you're never running on soft surfaces, your risk of injury is a lot higher. The stress on your bones and joints is higher, and you could get hurt, right? But the treadmill, if you're doing a couple treadmill runs a week or one treadmill run a week, that could be saving you because it could be giving you that extra cushion and taking it easier on your joints to where you don't get an overuse injury. The problem here is if you only ran on the treadmill, or really you could apply this to anything, or to outdoor running only on the grass or only on the crushed limestone. If that's all you did, and you never ran on the race surface the surface that you were going to race on, I'm thinking of a marathon here, where you're running on the road, then very obviously your legs wouldn't be prepared for the demands on race day, because the truth is you got to run some on the concrete. You got to run quite a bit on the concrete or the asphalt or whatever your racing surface is to get used to racing on that surface. If you just run on the treadmill or just run on soft surface, you're not going to develop the proper responses in your bones and joints that you need. You're not going to have the proper shock resistance there. And so it really is kind of a fine balance of training enough on the hard surfaces to make sure your muscles and your joints and your bones are prepared for the pounding that you'll get on race day, but not too much to where you're at risk for over injury, right? We're not training to race on a treadmill. We're training to race outside most of the time, okay? Again, thinking of a road marathon here as an example. All right, next we got biomechanical variations. That's basically a fancy way of saying on the treadmill, you're just running in a straight line, even stride, right? Outside, there's going to be twists and turns. There's going to be hills. You're going to have to make a sharp left at a stoplight. every so often. You might have some little terrain switches. You're switching from asphalt to concrete. There's some cracks, and you don't want to break your mama's back, so you got to jump over the cracks type thing, you know? So it's a lot different. It's more of a dynamic motion, and really it's a dynamic sport outside, because you're constantly, even if it seems like you're running with a uniform stride, depending on your running course, it depends a lot. There's always little differences, and even like small changes in the wind and stuff can impact this, because it can change your speed ever so slightly, and your gait changes. It's just microscopic little things like that, even outdoors. And you don't get those indoors. On the treadmill, you don't get them. You're running in a perfectly uniform straight line. There's no turns. A lot of times your stride becomes super consistent and symmetrical. And it's good to practice this. It's good to find that stride. And in many ways, that's what you're trying to do outside. But if you get overused to it on the treadmill, you won't build those little small muscles, kind of similar to what I'm saying with our ground reaction and impact forces. You're not going to build those small little muscles that you need for making turns outside, dealing with little hills and slight terrain variations. I mean, hills is a big one. You can train hills on the treadmill if you increase the incline, sure. But turns and little ups and downs and rolling hills, it's a lot harder to simulate that on a treadmill. And things such as, I mentioned, stabilizing muscles, core, hips, your calves. Some things don't get worked as much on the treadmill as they do outside. And it's very similar to the last point. Like, if you're training to run on a course outside and you overdo it on the treadmill, you're probably not going to be fully prepared for the demands on race day. Okay? Environmental differences. All right, this is another one. The point is, outside, you can't control the weather. I can't control the weather, Jackie.
I'm cold too.
Well, damn, Jackie, I can't control the weather.
Here, Jackie. Take my coat.
So outside, it can be hot, it can be cold, it can be anywhere in between. You might get lucky and just have a perfect weather day where it's just amazing, and that's great. But fact of the matter is, sometimes it's going to suck because it's going to be really hot outside, and you're going to be sweating a lot more, and your body's going to have to work a lot harder. It could be it could be very humid, and you don't have the effects of evaporative cooling to keep you cool. It could be freezing, and your body is struggling to warm up, and you're fighting demons that way. On a treadmill, it's kind of could be good or bad as well. So most of the time, though, treadmills, they are in a controlled temperature setting. They're indoors. So you can maybe even set your air condition in the treadmill. That's beautiful. Unfortunately, in my gym, you cannot do that. You're forced to run at 75 humid degrees in there, but it is what it is. You can potentially use treadmill indoors as like a heat training stimulus. So, if you're training for a really hot race, you could literally turn on a space heater, and it's cold outside. You could turn on a space heater, put on a jacket or whatever, and just crank away on the treadmill and make it like 90 degrees in there if you wanted to. So you can use it for stuff like that. It depends, though. The one thing I'll point out, too, it might be, hotter to run outside in a lot of cases. Like, the temperature might be hotter. But you could actually be having to work harder on the treadmill because you're not generating, like I said, you're not generating any headwind. You don't have any evaporative cooling a lot of times. So sweat is just accumulating and sliding off of your skin, and you're not getting that cooling effect because you're not physically moving forward. So that's something to consider as well. Okay, additional considerations. So a few more things we didn't cover yet. Not all treadmills are built the same, guys. Okay, so 10 miles an hour on one treadmill isn't necessarily equal to 10 miles an hour on another treadmill. Some belts wear out over time. Some just run slower or faster than others. Unless if you had like a mileage wheel, like a measuring wheel where you could measure out that exactly 1 mile is 1 mile on one treadmill, You don't know. It could be 0.98. It could be 1.02. Some treadmills are wrong. Whereas if you're on a track, if you have your GPS watch, or GPS watches are wrong a lot of times too, but it's a more accurate measurement probably of what the distance is, especially on a track. So you don't know if you're actually hitting that exact mileage. Mentally as well, that's another consideration here. Running outdoors can be less mentally taxing on some individuals because they're getting the stimulation of the scenery around them. But others are actually opposite with this. When you get in a groove indoors, sometimes you're able to stay focused and more mentally engaged versus if you're outdoors and having to deal with changing scenery and little environmental terrain variations. So it varies individual by individual in that regard. And then also, a lot of times people live in the city, people live in maybe more dangerous parts of town. It gets super dark in the winter months in the United States. So it can be safer to run on the treadmill like after work or even before work when it's dark. That's another thing worth noting as well. And it can be pretty time convenient, right? A lot of times you just go down to your apartment treadmill, or you got a treadmill in your house, and you don't have to worry about like driving somewhere to run. It's a lot more time efficient. Everybody's fighting for time nowadays. So if that's what it takes for you to get your run in, just going down to the treadmill versus not running at all because you would have had to drive 20 minutes and wait in traffic to get to your running spot, then the treadmill is clearly the way to go. So that's another consideration. All right, closing thoughts here. I mentioned it earlier. It is the lack of air resistance that allows you to run faster on the treadmill versus outside. That's what it is. It's no nature of the moving belt nonsense. That argument is incorrect. It's the lack of air resistance, which again is more in effect at the higher speeds that you run. Okay, so we talked about the 1% grade to help combat this. That's not 100% accurate all the time. It will depend more on the actual running speed you're doing. It'd be really cool if people did more studies on this. And I'm excited again to learn more. Okay, I have not read that full article. I want to read more into it, see if there's any more studies out there. And yeah, so it's the lack of air resistance. As far as impact forces and stimulus-wise, building the muscles that you need to perform on race day outdoors, the soft, repetitive motion on the treadmill probably isn't helping you if you do it all the time. You're probably neglecting those muscles that you need to not neglect for outdoor racing, okay? So impact forces from pounding. Hills, running the hills, right? You can try to simulate it on a treadmill, you can, but rolling hills a lot harder. Small terrain differences, small little changes here and there. But it's worth noting the soft surface from the treadmill can help you if you don't abuse it, right? Same goes with outdoors if you're training for a road marathon, say. Same goes with running on soft surface. I did a ton of that. I still try to do quite a bit of that. It'll save your joints, but you still need to make sure you're out there slamming the concrete at the end of the day. At some point, you need that, okay? Because that's what you're training for. Again, it's an art, not a science. The weather can help you or hurt you, right? You might have an extra bad headwind outside. You might have a tailwind outside that's actually helping you. You could have warm weather, cold weather, which is impacting your running speed outside as well. And on the treadmill, if you're using it as heat training, if you're in a very hot gym, again, you have no evaporative cooling if you're not generating a headwind if you're running indoors. And then the type of treadmill as well affects things, like I just said. Not all treadmills are accurate. Some will lie to you. And so you should take that into consideration as well. You could be thinking you're running 6-minute pace. In reality, you're running 6:20 pace. That's a big difference, guys. It truthfully is. So, hypothetical road treadmill model. So in my eyes, I thought like, okay, what if we could invent a treadmill that it constantly generated a headwind, like it would change speed based on how much force you put into the ground. It would constantly generate the same air drag force into your body depending on the speed you ran, and It's like you could design, you could customize the surface. You could make it like asphalt. You could make it concrete. You could make it grass. And then also you could like add like little turns and like hills and like courses. Like it's almost impossible, guys. But like I said earlier at the beginning, treadmill technology is getting better. They're probably going to come out with crazier and crazier stuff each year. I'm excited to see if they can do anything close to this. It's obviously the different surfaces part that's going to be impossible to do. But hey, that's my presentation. A little bit all over the place. Rambled for quite a bit of it. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys run on the treadmill a lot? Do you not? What do you like? Which do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I'll try to be coming back at you with more running content here. I got some more races coming up. I'm getting back into shape now. Had a little bit of a hiatus recently. But yeah, we'll be back on the YouTube grind here soon. All right. Peace out, y'all. Have a great day.